We're back. Here we are with the squad. We got David, Q, Akil, and the most important member of the squad, you. Today, we are starting off with a One Piece chapter 1062, Adventure in the Land of Science.
We're getting right into it. So, big reveal last chapter. We finally found out that Dr. Vegapunk was a woman, and Frankie obviously recognizes the name Vegapunk. You know, he spent 2 years in Vegapunk's hometown of Baltimore, not Baltimore. For those of you that spent time in Baltimore, I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding. This is not a shout out to anyone from Baltimore. He was saying that he went through a lot of the stuff in her lab and there was still a lot of stuff he didn't get to. Usopp was saying that the mech that Vegapunk has is several times larger than General Frankie, and it sucks that Luffy and Chopper aren't there to witness it with them. And true to his simp nature, Sanji, what a stunning lady. I mean, this dude just doesn't stop.
What a surprise.
Not surprised, right, Akil?
No, absolutely not. I knew it was going to happen the second I saw Vegapunk step out and be a woman. But Robin is the first one to notice. So like, hey, hang on. This is the first I've heard of Vegapunk being a woman, and you're far too young. Vegapunk has been active for too many years. And we get the reveal, another reveal, that this isn't the main body, which we did call last chapter that we covered. And this is actually Vegapunk 2, Lilith. And that, and we don't get much more explanation than that at this time, but at that point, she pretty much just tells the Straw Hats to run their pockets. She's like, we always run out of research funds in a jiffy, so hand over your valuables and get out of here. And Nami's a little upset about it, you know, money lover that she is. She's like, what? These waters are chilly enough without you being cold too. What kind of rescue is this? And Lilith is very quick. She's like, are you deaf? This is not a rescue. Trespassing on these waters is impossible, and they will sink you without a question. And from the water pop out a whole slew of weaponized sea beasts, and they're completely surrounded not only the giant mech, which dwarfs in comparison to half of these, but the Straw Hats as well. And so, on one hand, both Frankie and Usopp are kind of impressed by the weaponized sea beast, even though Usopp's a little more scared than he is impressed. But then Lilith gets a call and she like picks up, and it's someone who's yelling at her for always insisting on looting and telling her to have some pride as a scientist. And then they're like, this is the Straw Hat Pirates, the newly dubbed Emperor crew. They're not just going to surrender. And Lilith is like, that's exactly why I'm trying to steal their money. And he's like, you made a big mistake though. It doesn't matter. And she's like, I had them surrounded. And then the voice tells her, look at the swordsman. That's Pirate Hunter Zoro. His bounty is 1.111 billion. See how calm he is. He knows you're in range for him to end you in an instant. And we can see classic Zoro fashion. His hand's already on his sword, on go mode all the time.
Yeah, Zoro's always ready to start the beef with anybody who wants it. And you see that Nico Robin is no stranger to the beef as well, because she's already in position to let out a Milfleur or whatever flower move she wants to snap necks left and right. And then I find it funny that you have Nami cowering behind her in fear amongst these, you know, Sea King size weaponized mecha beasts, which are pretty damn scary. We cut back to Dr. Vegapunk, and this is the Shaka body, and it says, no matter, bring them here. I have an interest in that crew.
So we cut back to Luffy, and Luffy's talking to Bonnie, and he's asking, so you've been here before to Egghead Island? And Bonnie's like, yeah, when I was a kid, it was pretty run-the-mill lab at that time, though. So how come you came back? And Bonnie's like, I'm here for answers. I'll have those bastards' life if I don't hear what I want to hear. And she's like, Dr. Vegapunk's the one that turned my dad into a cyborg. And they're like, whoa, that's awesome. And she's like, no. When he became a cyborg, he lost all sense of himself. He doesn't even know who I am anymore. He doesn't recognize his own daughter. So he's nothing but a living weapon. And Jinbei is like, oh, that's terrible. And of course, Luffy says, oh, sorry, Bogey. She's like, it's Bonnie.
Yeah, Bonnie.
Yeah, Bonnie.
He's like, yeah, I got it right the first time. I think it's important to note here that even though we see that she's picturing an image of Kuma, the Straw Hats aren't made aware that Kuma is her father. So they don't know that connection. So they finally made it to the surface. They're trying to find some food, and then they become amazed by what they see in front of them. So they see a lot of Vegapunk's laboratory and a whole bunch of like huge mecha structures, giant beasts, giant weapons, pretty cool stuff. And before I forget to mention it, Bonnie was thinking this in her head. She said that she forgot to mention that she ran into Sabo at Marijois, and she said that she could spill the beans later.
And so Jinbei's like, what in the world is all this? And, and Luffy, Chopper like, hold on, I'll be back after a ride. And Bonnie's like, wait, we're trying to infiltrate here. Like, you can't just be out here, like, pretty much doing whatever you want. We need to be more, like, secretive. And so Luffy goes head first. He's like, Gumu Gumu no rocket, goes straight for the dragon. And as he's flying towards the dragon, like, closes his mouth and consumes Luffy. But to our surprise, Luffy gets spit out through the head of the dragon. And so, like, what the heck? Because it seems like Luffy just kind of phased through him. And he's like, I thought it was swallowed for sure, but I guess not. And he's like, whoa, is that a giant parfait? And so now they're getting super hungry. So Bonnie, Chopper, Luffy all go in for the meal. They all hop in, and Jinbei's like, come on, man, this has to be a trap. Like, what are you guys thinking? You guys are fools. And then, again, they go right through what this imaginary food is right in front of them. And so they're like, what the? We went right through it. And Jinbei is like, And he's like, how can we see it, but we can't touch it? And Chopper's like, oh, that's so cruel to make us hungry like that.
And then Luffy kind of chimes in. He's like, oh, crap, did we die earlier and not noticed? And they're like, there's no way we're ghosts. Like, I've never seen one before, but this parfait must be a hologram. And Luffy gets mad and is like, what the hell is that? That ticks me off. And Bonnie explains that what a hologram is, just a 3D image made of life that you see him in comics and science fiction. And Luffy's even more mad that someone would make an image of food to trick him. And he kind of puts two and two together. He's like, oh, the space monster, that's why I went through it. It's like everything around here must be a hologram of some kind. And while they're kind of talking about that, Chopper stumbles upon this machine with a bunch of buttons that have pictures of food on them. And Bonnie's like, give it up. Everything on this island's a sham. That's probably a hologram too. And Jinbei even mentions like, hey, weren't the seas around the island freezing? Why isn't this place freezing too? And we see that there's this giant mech that kind of comes around and explains that this is a winter island, but the environment is set to tropical mode in here. And everyone's shocked, and they're like, the robot continues explaining that their island aircon invention lets you specify and regulate the temperature of an area right down to the soil. Luffy's like, this hologram's as big as Kaido. You're a hollow right too, right? And he goes to kind of punch it. But this time his punch connects, and then he gets punched right back. And he kind of cries out, I'm sorry, as he gets slammed into the machine.
And then when he gets slammed into the machine, you see that it makes all this food. And then you see a hamburger, a drink, and Bonnie's like, oh, you can touch it. And so they finally find the food that they're looking for. And not only that, but there's a bunch of different food options. There's steak, omurice, tonkatsu, cotton candy, cake, ramen, fried chicken, hot dogs. I'm getting hungry just listening to things that they create. Vegapunk's like, well, you can appreciate my work. That's the unmanned cooking device. And then I find it funny that this one kind of gets mad, this Atlas one. It says it can turn raw ingredients into one of the 500 unique dishes in under a minute. And the make do with what you've got mode is the best. Pizza, pasta. But I can't be too happy since a lack of competent engineers means that this bucket of bolts can't be mass produced. And is following the blueprints really that hard? It pisses me off as he just lays into the dragon. So they said that the island aircon is in the same damn boat. Its sensors can monitor living things, and it could tame the weather system if it just had a bit more money. Endless ideas, but not enough resources. And everyone's kind of surprised that they punched a hologram. And I think Luffy is still amazed by the food options because he says waffles, fried shrimp. It's just amazing how much food they have. Vegapunk goes on to mention that the photonic gloves make it possible to interact with light. And then, perception shapes your sense of reality, but touching a projected object turns that on its head. And then while Luffy's stuffing his face, he's like, so that girl isn't real?
And then Vegapunk goes, debates on what makes something real is as old as time. It's something you have to decide for yourself, but I consider the matter settled. So Jinbei asks, so what are you exactly? And so then it's revealed that, oh, I'm just your resident, the scientific genius for hire, Dr. Vegapunk. And we see the 06 on the suit, right? So this is Dr. Vegapunk Atlas. And Bonnie's like, huh? You would have thought to herself, like, what the hell? That's a total lie. So that kind of indicates that maybe Bonnie has either met Vegapunk or this is something new. Like this doesn't make sense to her. And they're like, you're Vegapunk? I've heard that name. And Kobe told me all about you.
And so it cuts once again to a different place in the new world. We see a world government ship is sailing, and someone's asking, so what now? And we see a very familiar nose telling Lucci just to keep listening, and they explain that Vegapunk is technically a single individual, but his genius is second only to his busyness. And then he says, well, imagine if there were more than one person. His grand idea was to split up into 6 people, and he pretty much explains that he has 6 satellites that are also Dr. Vegapunk, the main body, and then Punk 1, Punk 2, Punk 3, Punk 4, Punk 5, and Punk 6, each one which kind of has its own emotion or thing attached to it, with Punk 1 being logic, Punk 2 being evil, Punk 3 being flair, Punk 4 being wisdom, Punk 5 being wrath, and Punk 6 being desire. And Lucci's just like, am I weird for thinking that sounds impossible? Geniuses are such a pain. And he's like, in short, our assignment is to return this problem child, and we kind of see Kuma Seraphim behind them, that they're going to be returning back to Egghead, and then while taking care not to damage any of the lab's precious assets, they're to eliminate every last Vegapunk. And we see that Cypher Pole Aegis Zero has sent out 3 masked assassins, Kaku, Lucci, and Stussy, to eliminate Vegapunk. And Lucci's a bit confused. He's like, so we're meant to kill the single most useful man in the world? I wonder if this has something to do with the recent Lelouch incident? Stussy says, someone with instincts like yours should know better than to question things like these. And Kaku says, agreed, don't get us in any hot water, Lucci. And that's where the chapter ends.
Getting into the discussion section,
Yes.
I think that there's a few things we want to talk about. One being the connection between Bonnie, Kuma, and Vegapunk. So, obviously, we know that Bonnie is Kuma's child, which I think is crazy. And she was on the island once before. So she must have been there when Kuma started initially going through that process of being turned into a cyborg. And because of Bonnie's fruit, I don't actually know how old she is, right? Because you can't tell, like, from her base form if she's an adult, if she's just a kid that chose to be in her adult form, or what. But time powers like that always have an interesting dynamic, because there's got to be, like, some trade-off, right? She has near immortality, but, like, at what cost, right? What stuck out from this chapter to you? And I'm going to start with David.
Yeah, I think looking at the relationship, I think one small thing that kind of stuck out to me is when Vegapunk says that, Vegapunk Atlas says that they are a scientific genius for hire. So I think what that tells me is that Vegapunk hasn't always worked for the government, the world government necessarily. And so maybe there's a possibility that Kuma and Bonnie kind of had a relationship with Vegapunk earlier on, especially since she says, oh, I've been here when I was a kid, and she's like, oh, that, when Vegapunk says, like, oh, I'm Vegapunk, being Atlas, like, she's like, oh, this doesn't seem right, that seems like off, like, that's a lie. Like there's obviously some things that aren't, like, adding up, and so I think it's possible that they knew each other probably before Vegapunk worked for the world government before.
So for me, there are 2 things that definitely stood out to me this chapter that just got me thinking. The first was back when Vegapunk Lilith captured the Straw Hats, the last thing that we kind of see them say before Shaka says to bring them to him is that Zoro says, hey Vegapunk, there's something I want from you, so you'd better play nice, got it? And my main question is, what is it that he wants from Vegapunk? Like, as far as we've seen, like, Zoro of all people has, like, no real reason to, like, that we know of for him to want something that Vegapunk has. And so, like, the one thing I'm thinking is, what could it be that, like, Zoro wants from Vegapunk?
I think something also worth noting is that Vegapunk has an interest in that crew, and Vegapunk, Shaka, wanted Lilith to bring the crew to them. I think that's a connection between what Zoro wants and what Shaka that Vegapunk wants.
I think, and this is totally kind of off the wall theory, but it just kind of into my head when you mentioned that, Akil, that Zoro had business with Vegapunk also. Vegapunk is known for, like, enhancing people's powers, and one thing that I've always been curious of Zoro is his eye, the eye that's, like, closed now. Like, I always wonder if that was, there's some type of power associated with that, and maybe he's looking to either unlock it or something. Like, I feel like Zoro might have, like, some type of, I don't know, this Rinnegan of the One Piece world or whatever. Like,
I was gonna say this man's waiting to unlock his Sharingan.
Exactly. No, but seriously, I think that could be a possibility.
I think that it's also interesting that Vegapunk has 6 bodies. So the question is, do we think it's 6 bodies that are answering to one body, or it's one body that's been split up 6 different ways?
I think they're probably working in conjunction with one another because it seems like Lilith definitely does what she wants and Shaka is always kind of reprimanding her for it. Whereas if they were just kind of all being controlled, I'm not sure why Lilith would do something that the others didn't approve of.
That makes sense. What about you, David? What do you think?
If I had to guess, I would think the main Vegapunk body, he seems pretty old. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like kind of crippled and like isn't able to move. And so these bodies is kind of like his ideas living on forever. From what we're seeing, he definitely cares about his genius and his brain and his kind of like ideations living on forever, right? So he's gonna expand. I mean, that's why he expanded his personality to 6 people that happen to be cyborgs that can't die. You know, instead of like having children.
And what do you guys think about what's wrong with the Seraphim that they're trying to return? And then why do you think that they have to dispose of Vegapunk?
Well, they did call the Seraphim Kuma a problem child, so maybe it's the fact that Kuma's Seraphim won't listen to the Marines' orders. I'm not sure necessarily if it's some sort of influence of Kuma's will itself is like still kind of alive in that iteration, and so it won't bow to their will, or if it's something completely different, but it just seems as though they can't keep it under control, and that's probably why they're sending it back.
But yeah, maybe this one still has some will. We still don't know how the Seraphim are created, whether it's like a clone or if it's actually like a child or how it's like made. So I think that definitely has some influence to it.
I was just thinking that because of the child, it acts in childish ways. So they need to, put some discipline on this Kuma. Good luck putting discipline on Kuma. He's a pretty broad dude. And then my last question for you guys. Why do you think they have to eliminate Vegapunk?
I'm honestly not sure. Because on one hand, like, why would you want to eliminate Vegapunk? Especially because Vegapunk does seem heavily aligned with the Marines. He even said to Straw Hats, like, I'm with the Marines, you silly pirates. Like, it doesn't seem like Vegapunk has any inclination to betray them. And half of their inventions are, like, what's kind of carrying the Marines' firepower right now, especially with the introduction of these Seraphim. So I'm not sure. Like I said, it has something to do with the Lelouch incident, but I'm not sure what kind of tie-in that could have with Vegapunk that would push them to the point of just wanting to wipe.
Well, I think it's important to note that the CP0 don't work for the government. The CP0 work for the World Nobles. Separate entity entirely, right? And then you have the Marines, which are their own entity. The interests of the World Nobles will sometimes supersede the need of the world government. And we saw that in the case of, what's his name? Doflamingo. Remember when he released the newspaper saying that he resigned from the warlords? Yeah. But that turned out to be a fake, remember? Yeah. And that was just to trick Law into releasing Caesar Clown. Whatever want the World Nobles have is gonna supersede the government.
Right.
Yeah, you make a good point, because I did kind of forget that, but still, I don't even know. Like, the world nobles, I can't even think what kind of reasons they would have. Like, the world government, they're kind of shady. They're kind of tossing. It's a toss up as to like what they're doing and whether it's valid. But I can't even begin to kind of grasp what the world nobles might be thinking and wanting to get rid of Dr. Vegapunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I could possibly think is that.
He knows too much. No.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say that they think there's value in him, right? Like even Lucci says, he's the single most useful person in the world, and even like the fact that like they want to keep his assets, right? So it can't be that his weapons are too powerful because they still want the weapons, right? They can use the weapons. Like it's not like the weapons are out of control. So I feel like it might be. Yeah, he might have just learned something that they didn't want him to learn, and maybe it could do with the ruler of all things, being seen in his throne, and the throne not being empty. Like maybe one of the cyborgs like was there with Sabo.
Well, I guess that kind of wraps up the things that I wanted to talk about. Anything else you guys wanted to bring up?
The photonic gloves that we saw Atlas display that allow you to physically interact with light. My boy Kizaru's in trouble. At this point, anybody who doesn't have hockey could just as easily put the hands on him now. Before, he only had one thing to worry about, strong hockey users. But now, he can get the hands from anybody. Imagine Frankie with a strong right. that has photonic gloves on it.
Yeah, I definitely think that those photonic gloves are gonna come back to bite Kizu in the butt.
Yeah.
But I wonder what else they could be used for, like maybe like redirecting the lasers that pacifistas will shoot out. So you could like have a Dragon Ball Z like
Ooh.
ki deflection, right?
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
We'll wrap up the video there, and we'll see you guys in our next One Piece chapter episode. And squad out.
Squad out.
Squad out.